going to do just a very brief 10-minute interactive session to bring us all up to date about nuclear issues today. Many people tend to think, well, those stories from Hiroshima and Nagasaki that happened so long ago, what does that have to do with me? But there are probably some of you in this room who know that at this moment, there are thousands of nuclear weapons in the United States and Russia that are on hair trigger alert, ready to launch in minutes. Those missiles are controlled by human beings, by computers, neither of which are without failure. So it's important for us to recognize that while we're going to be hearing stories from the past, we all, every person in this room, every person that's alive in every part of the world, has a personal stake in the nuclear issue because of the live threat that we face every moment of every day. So hearing these stories, we want you to feel inspired towards action. And at the end of our session today, we're going to give you some ideas of how to become involved. But because it's early in the morning, and maybe, you know, we'll get a little exercise blood running through our veins, let's do a very brief game together. And it goes like this. Stand up if you like hip-hop. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Sit down. Okay, now you can stand up or raise your hand if you speak more than one language. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, stand up or raise your hand if you enjoy cooking. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, stand up or raise your hand if you enjoy eating. Thank you very much. Okay, sit down. Okay, now we're going to move more towards the subject matter at hand. I'd just like to see, stand up or raise your hand if you can name any of the 9 countries that have nuclear weapons. Okay, very good, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so just to review, those 9 nations are the United States, Russia, UK, France, China, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel. Those are the 9 countries that have nuclear weapons. So let's raise your hand if you can tell me, of those 9 nations, which 2 have the most nuclear weapons? The US and Russia. That's right. The US and Russia have the majority of those weapons. Okay, let's try one more. Stand up or raise your hand if you can tell me any of the characteristics of a nuclear explosion. Okay, very good. Okay, I know that you guys know all of this, but because our time is so short, I'm just going to briefly review the main characteristics of a nuclear explosion. One is blast. Blast, an explosive force like nothing we can experience in nature. The most powerful super hurricane that has ever happened on Earth is nothing like the blast of a nuclear explosion. Heat, the fire storms that result from a nuclear explosion, something called super infernos. It's a fire that's so strong it takes the oxygen out of the air and the fire feeds itself. Again, there is no such fire that we can experience in nature like that is produced by a nuclear explosion. And the other characteristic, which is the most peculiar and pernicious part of a nuclear explosion, that being, anyone know? Radiation. So when a nuclear bomb explodes, we have something that results called radiation, which can hang around for millennia upon millennia, increasing the risk of cancer, and also causing genetic defects. Now, when we say genetic defects, is that something that we can cure by an operation or a medicine? No, it's not. That's something that can be passed from one generation to the next. So what I'd like you to understand is that those bombs that were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and August 9th, 1945, are still killing people to this day. Those bombs are still affecting people's health and people's well-being. Because not only does the cancer increase or the possibility of genetic defects, but also what happened, and the Hibakusha can speak to this, is that Hibakusha, the atomic bomb survivors, were discriminated against. Because people were afraid that radiation sickness was contagious. So there's a lot that the Hibakusha can teach us. And what I want to do now is just give you a very brief sound demonstration so that we can imagine the explosive force of today's nuclear arsenal. Because remember, although you're hearing stories from the past, this is something that affects us to this day. Okay, how are you guys doing? Good. Can anybody tell me who said imagination is more important than knowledge? Albert Einstein. What do you think he meant by that?
My statement isn't together yet. So.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm sorry. Albert Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge because we've got to imagine things before they come into being, right? We imagine things first, then things can be made. Sometimes we use our imagination in order for things not to happen. So right now, we're going to use our imagination to imagine the firepower of the world's nuclear arsenal to give us that experience, that inspiration to understand what could happen and what we do not want to happen. This is a demonstration called the BB demo. It was developed by Physicians for Social Responsibility in the 1980s during the height of the Cold War. Unfortunately, this demonstration is still very relevant. So you're going to hear two sounds. The first sound is the sound of one BB dropping into the tin. And for the purpose of our sound demonstration, that sound of one BB dropping into the tin represents all the firepower of the Second World War. So the firepower of the Second World War, when we think of that, that means all the bullets, all the bombs, all the grenades, all the conventional weapons, the torpedoes, the two new nuclear weapons that were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that's all represented for the purpose of our sound demonstration by one BB dropping into the tin. And for those of you who are more science-minded, the explosive force, the approximate explosive force of the Second World War was around 3 megatons. So every time you hear one BB dropping into the tin, that is equivalent to the firepower of World War II. So the second sound you're going to hear is the equivalent firepower of the world's nuclear arsenal. That's the 17,000, approximate, 17,000 nuclear weapons owned by those 9 nations that we identified earlier. 17,000 nuclear weapons in today's arsenal. So in order to engage your imagination, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes. And this second sound, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes while we listen to the equivalent firepower of the world's nuclear arsenal 69 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay, thank you. You can open your eyes. So, normally we'd ask you for your feedback now, but in the interest of time, we want to move along to the stories of the Hibakusha themselves. What we can report from sharing this demonstration with other students is that people have reported feeling sad, angry, afraid when they hear about that level of radioactive violence available in our world today. And when we think about those things, it's important to have those emotions. Those are healthy emotions to this level of violence that is available to us when we think about the resources that could be used elsewhere to fund human needs like education and housing, good health systems. So when we listen to the Hibakusha, let's stay with those emotions. And I'd just like to say that as we listen to Reiko and Michio-san, you know, these stories can be very difficult to hear. Imagine how difficult they are to tell. Because we all have the experience of having pain in our lives, and when we recount those painful memories, those feelings can reemerge. So Reiko and Michio risk their personal comfort to tell you their stories because they never want what happened to them to happen to anyone else. So we're first going to hear from Reiko Yamada, and then we're going to hear from Michio Hakariya, and following that, we're going to hear from you. I'd like to say thank you so much for your attention thus far, and now please join me in welcoming Reiko Yamada from Hiroshima.